Knock at the Cabin. Is it any good? How many butter pumps will it get? Let's find out.
My baby likes butter.
Well, butter babies, I did it. I didn't think I was gonna do it, but I went ahead and did it. I went to see a scary movie, and it turns out it wasn't that scary. It had all the elements of a scary movie. House in the Woods? Check. Home invasion? Check. Ron Weasley getting his brains bashed in? Check. So you would think I would have been sitting in that theater shitting bricks the entire time. I wasn't. Now, to be sure, it certainly had some scary elements in it. There were parts of it that were truly horrifying. But what I appreciated about the movie and M. Night Shyamalan's direction in it is that he didn't allow the camera to linger long in those moments. The camera turned its head during the more gruesome parts of the movie, which made the movie, at least for me, easier to watch. But after watching it, I didn't like it. Actually, you know what? I take that back. I left the theater feeling conflicted. Now, taken at face value, this is a really, really good movie. It's tense when it needs to be. There are elements of true horror in it. The acting in it was top tier. Even David Bautista, who we will get to in a moment. Objectively, it hit all the right notes and kept me mostly engaged throughout the film. There were a few moments of stretching the lines of credulity for me, but for the most part, it was really a good film, one of M. Night Shyamalan's best in recent years. Then there's the part of the movie that has something to say. All good movies have something to say. They can spur good debate and conversation. They can encourage a deeper level of contemplation and may even change our minds about how we view the world and our place in it. Honestly, I hated what at the core this movie had to say. It's literally all the way fucked up. There is absolutely nothing redeeming about this movie's point of view, and it makes me wonder if the screenwriters Steve Desmond, Michael Sherman, and M. Night himself, who apparently rewrote the entire script, really do believe what their script had to say from a spiritual point of view. So, this review is going to actually be split into two parts. In the first part, I will talk about how objectively this really is a good movie. And in the second part, I'll talk about how I hated what this movie stood for and what it had to say. Then we'll see at the end how many butter pumps I end up giving it. By the way, from here on out, there are spoilers. Lots and lots of spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you might want to pause the video here, go watch the movie, and then come back. So let's start out part one with the good stuff. What is this movie about? Let's get into it. Andrew and Eric and their adopted daughter Wynn head out to the country for a nice relaxing vacation in a cabin in the woods. Pause. That was their first mistake. Vacationing in a cabin in the woods is never a good idea. Moving on. Four strangers break into the cabin and they tie up the two fathers, but they leave the young Wynn free. But they have a demand that they want to demand of the family. They basically are saying you have to kill one of your family members in order to save the earth from an apocalypse. Moreover, nobody is allowed to leave the cabin until that decision is made. The intruders can't make that decision for them. They must make that choice for themselves. And nor can one member of the family choose to commit suicide to save the others. No, the family as a group must decide which one of them to sacrifice, and then the other two must carry it out. If they refuse to choose, 4 plagues will fall on the earth, literally decimating it. And the family who refuses to choose will be left to wander the earth alone. Sounds crazy, right? Correct. The kidnapped family pretty much think the same thing, and they're not willing to sacrifice anybody. And because they refuse to choose, one by one, the intruders kill off one of their own in a really weird ritual right in front of the family. Each time one of the intruders dies, a global disaster happens. The first is a tsunami that wipes out the entire northwestern coast. Then the family is asked if they will choose to sacrifice someone again. When they refuse, the second intruder is murdered by the remaining 2 intruders, and then a global plague rips through the entire world. The virus mostly attacks children, so children around the world are literally dying in the most horrific manner. When the third intruder dies after the family still refuses to sacrifice one of their own, planes literally start falling from the sky. Even after all of this, the kidnapped family still refuses to make a choice in that matter, believing all of these things to be coincidences and the 4 intruders to be lunatics. After asking them if they will choose and they say no, the final intruder kills himself. And at that point, lightning bolts start falling from the sky. So the family decides to make a break for it, but as they do, one of the fathers, Eric, starts to try to convince his partner, Andrew, that maybe there's something to all this and maybe they should think about it. See, in the initial fight that happened when the intruders broke in, Eric fell and hit his head, giving himself a slight concussion. He said he saw a vision in a mirror after he hit his head that matched up with the visions the intruders told them they all had, and maybe they're right. It can't all be a coincidence, right? The world is literally being torn apart by lightning at this point, so they can no longer deny something fishy is going on. Well, after a long, drawn-out argument, the gun they were carrying goes off and Eric dies. The way the movie is shot, it's unclear if Andrew shot him, if Eric shot himself, or if the gun accidentally went off. But regardless, Eric becomes the sacrifice. And just like that, everything stops. Planes stop falling from the sky. Lightning stops ripping the world apart. The plague that was killing the world's children suddenly begins to diminish. A second tsunami that was heading straight toward Hawaii disappears. And even though untold millions of people have died, untold billions more are now safe. The world rights itself and moves forward. Andrew and his daughter Wynn hop into a truck and drive off into the sunset. The end. So whose performances did I really enjoy in this film? I gotta say Kristen Cui, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. It's spelled C-U-I, so I pronounce it Cui. If I got that wrong, Kristen, I am so sorry, but you were a standout in this film. I was so impressed by little Miss Kristen. She's all of 9 years old, and she carries the adult subject matter of this film. She really carries it really, really well. She reminds me of Kristen Dunst in Interview with the Vampire, or Dakota Fanning in I Am Sam. Kristen was all of 11 years old in Interview, and Dakota was all of 7 for I Am Sam. Yet both of those actresses carried those films in ways that truly belied their years. And the same thing goes with Kristen Cui. This little girl is one to watch. She is amazing in this movie. Nikki Amuka Bird as Sabrina. Sabrina is one of the 4 intruders, and probably the one that's least on board what the 4 have decided to do. She's had the same visions as the other 3, and yet has been a reluctant participant in this whole thing. I felt her conflict, her inner turmoil, even when she wasn't speaking. Just the way she moved through this film and the visceral reactions she had to everything that was happening both inside and outside the cabin. Let me tell you, I believed her in this movie. I totally bought that she wanted to be anywhere but where she was, but for whatever reason she was compelled to stay. And quite frankly, I was grateful for that performance because the other 3 seemed way more invested and therefore way more creepy than she did. Nikki brought a humanity to her role that the other 3, as good as they were missing. That being said, David Bautista did some of his best work here. Honey, he still can't act. God bless his entire heart. He still cannot act, but, and this is a huge but, this man has grown by leaps and bounds as an actor from his starting days to where he is now in his art form. The David Bautista of Riddick, remember that movie about 10 years ago? Could not have pulled off what he pulled off in this movie. And while he is not phenomenal in this role, I will say he is good in it. And he's getting better, which means that he can only get better from here. I have seen his progress, and I honestly can't wait to see where he ends up as his skills as an actor increase. Ben Aldridge was great as Andrew. What I really appreciated about his performance was his take no bullshit kind of an attitude. That included handing Ron Weasley's ass right back to him in the initial fight when Ron and the others 3 broke into the cabin. Far too often, gay people in the media are presented as victims. And while this entire movie could be seen as the victimization of another gay couple and their kid, a point that's clearly made at the top of the film, it's the way they handle that victimization, especially Andrew. Throughout this movie, Andrew was ready, willing, and able, and did throw some hands. And the bitch held his own. And as a queer person who may suck some dick but ain't never been no punk, that was so refreshing for me to see on screen. Again, I love a gay person that is ready, willing, and able, and all too excited to throw some hands at somebody that is being disrespectful. And besides all of that, Andrew was also the constant voice of reason in the film. I just loved Ben Aldridge in this role. He had so much more to do and so much more of the movie to carry than his on-screen partner, Jonathan Groff. Which leads me to the performances I didn't enjoy. Jonathan Groff was just there, which is really strange. Jonathan is one of my favorite actors out there today. I love his choices in movies, and it just completely threw me to see him in this role, which really gave him next to nothing to do. More than a few scenes would go by where Andrew was doing most, if not all, the talking to the intruders, and Eric was just sitting there. Now, to be fair, he was slightly concussed, but there were more than a few flashback scenes. A lot of this movie happens in flashback form to give us some of Eric and Andrew's backstory. And even in those scenes, he just didn't register for me at all. It was like his character was there to be in service to his partner, and that's it. And if that's true, I really don't understand why an actor of Jonathan Groff's stature accepted the role. The only thing I can think of is the representation matters angle, and maybe that was a good enough reason for him. If so, okay, I get it, but I feel like he was just wasted in the role. Speaking of being wasted, Rupert Grint, a favorite actor of mine since his Harry Potter days, was completely wasted in this film. I think I've said before that Rupert Grint is one of the best character actors out there nowadays. But honey, you wouldn't know it by the way he phoned this performance in. He got beat up by Ben Aldridge and was literally the first of the four intruders to be killed off in the first third of the movie. Again, I can't for the life of me understand why he chose this role. While I believed him as Redmond the intruder, his presence just didn't make that much of an impact on me. This part, especially since he dies in the first third of the movie, this part could literally have gone to any other actor. Two bad performances aside, objectively, this is a really good movie. You'd think this movie would come highly recommended, but I can't. In fact, the more I think about this movie, the more I hate it. So let's get into the reasons why. I like to consider myself a spiritual person. Part of my spiritual consciousness is standing in the faith that ultimately the universe is kind. Our higher power, however we choose to see him, her, them, it, the unknowable, loves us unconditionally. Moreover, they are concerned with and would love to be intimately involved in our day-to-day personal spiritual evolution and growth. They want to see us succeed. They want to see us thrive. They only want the best for us, and they will do anything in their power, short of denying us free will, to make that happen for us. In short, the universe loves us. There is nothing loving about the universe in this movie. In fact, the movie goes out of its way to drive home the fact that the universe hates us, and it wants to punish us for no other reason than it can. There are no lessons to be learned. There is no kindness, no compassion, no love. The universe in this movie is vicious, unkind, and cruel. The premise of this movie is the universe chooses four random innocent people as the four horsemen of the apocalypse. These four innocent souls have absolutely no say-so in the matter. They've done nothing to warrant them being chosen in this way. And actually, 3 out of the 4 of them have always been genuinely good people. And even the 4th, as awful as he is trying to learn from his past behavior and is trying to be better. These are 4 people chosen to be part of a cosmic game they didn't sign up for, where there truly are no winners. Not only that, but they are chosen to die. They have no say-so in that matter either. Every time the chosen family, and we're going to get to them in a minute, say they won't sacrifice one of their own, one of the 4 horsemen has to be brutally murdered. Then once they're murdered, a global disaster happens, taking out untold millions of unsuspecting innocent people. Why? No explanation is ever given. Because by the end of the movie, the story leans into the fact that these 4 intruders are actually telling the truth and aren't lunatics, I start to feel sorry for them. They seemingly have no choice in the matter and must do what they're doing, even though none of them asked for it and none of them want to do it. By the end of the movie, my heart was aching for them. Then there's the kidnapped family. 3 more innocent people who are dragged into this fucked up cosmic game through no fault of their own. Not only do they have to suffer the trauma of their vacation cabin being invaded and them being tied up, and all of what that means for a gay couple and their child, although the movie, to its credit, is double quick to let the family and the audience know that the family's sexuality has absolutely nothing to do with why they were chosen. But they also have to suffer the trauma of watching 4 people die in the most brutal fashion right in front of them. All because the family refuses to sacrifice one of their own. And on top of that, after each one of the horsemen is killed, one of the other horsemen turns on the news and they have to watch how whatever global disaster is being released on the world because of their refusal to choose to kill one of their own. Why? Again, no explanation is ever given. And quite honestly, I don't even know if having an explanation would make any of this better. Millions upon millions of people die in this movie, and they're all innocent. An explanation certainly wouldn't make any of this any more understandable. It's consciously and aggressively evil. The higher power I believe in and have a personal relationship with is not that kind of entity. And that it is suggested that somewhere there could be a higher power that is exactly like the one depicted in this movie really makes me sick to my stomach. So how many butter pumps am I going to give this movie? Well, for being an objectively good movie, I should give it a 5. But because on a spiritual level, I absolutely hated it and would give it a 0, a happy medium for me is going to be 3 butter pumps. If you can look past the spiritual problems with this movie, or if you agree that the universe is aggressively cruel and uncaring, then you will definitely enjoy it. Because objectively, the movie is good. But anything deeper than a surface level reading of the movie might make you feel a little bit differently about it. And so I turn it over to you. Have you seen Knock at the Cabin? If so, what did you think? Were you okay with the way the universe was portrayed in this movie, or did you feel like some kind of way about it? Finally, how many butter pumps would you give it? I want to hear all about it in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, my butter babies. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.